Stavesacre. That's right, I said it's Stavesacre. Today on the Heaven's Metal podcast, video, show, we're going to talk about this supergroup called Stavesacre. Hey, you like my new set? I am in the back part of the building I work in downtown Austin, Texas. Anyway, so I want to talk about this supergroup made up of former members of the Crucified and Focused. This band called Stavesacre kind of took part of the world by surprise. I say part of the world because I don't want to speak for everybody in the universe or the world, but I was surprised. I didn't hear a lot of hype like we did with Demon Hunter when this new band was being formed. They just came out with a 3-song demo on cassette, and man, they were, of course they had everybody's attention because of their resume. You know, everybody and their brother loved the Crucified. The Crucified, I think, more consistently out Pantera, but that's another discussion. But anyway, and then Dirk Jimenez, the bass player from Focused, who was a really cool spirit-filled hardcore band from Southern California that was playing huge shows in Southern Cal. I got to see a couple of shows at just random churches that had like 1,000 people there, and such an impressive band. But anyway, so Stavesacre came together with Mark Solomon on vocals, Jeff Ballou on guitar, who was the bass player for the Crucified, bassist Dirk Jimenez, and before they had Sam West, they had another drummer whose name escapes me at the moment, and I just dropped a song title on you. Did you notice that? Anyway, so the first exposure I had to Stavesacre after that 3-song cassette, I believe, was when they played Cornerstone that year. And as I think about it now, surely their debut album, Friction, must have come out before they played an afternoon set at Cornerstone, but maybe not. Cornerstone was very good at talent scouting and very astute at booking bands that were awesome. Another shout out to Cornerstone. What an amazing part of our culture and our history. And you have no idea what you're missing out on, younger generation who did not get a chance to go to Cornerstone. It was a Christian music festival attended by 15 to 25,000 people every year around the July 4th weekend, a 4 or 5 or 6 day festival wrapped around the July 4th weekend. And what was great about that, as my friend Paul Kupek has said, you get to be around 10,000 other people that feel the same way about Christian music that you do. And of course, he said that quote when there was about 10,000 people going to the fest, but it grew to, I think 27,000 was the biggest peak number I ever saw when POD headlined the main stage. And of course, there was a ton of people who watched Charlie Daniels, including a bunch of locals from Macomb, Illinois, who came in to see the Charlie Daniels band play main stage. But anyway, back to Stavesacre. So I went to go see this afternoon set of Stavesacre, and they let their friends in the band called Roadside Monument open up. And I think the guitar player for Roadside Monument said, "Does anybody here read HM Magazine?" No, I'm serious. Anybody have a copy of HM Magazine? And somebody handed him a copy from the audience, which was cool. Someone in the audience actually had a copy of HM on them. And he read a portion of the album review that my assistant editor, Brian McGovern, much to his credit, but he wrote in the review that prior to this one song was the most annoying sound he'd ever heard. It was just this distorted guitar that was just squealing and squeaking for several seconds. And he actually made mention that it was the most annoying sound he'd ever heard in his life or something like that in the review. And so the guitar player grabs the magazine, he reads that portion of the review, and he starts playing his guitar and getting feedback. And he goes, "Is that annoying enough for you?" And they started their 3-song set, or a very short set, before Stavesacre came on. So that was my first introduction to Stavesacre, I believe. And let's see, they were on the cover of issue number 59 of HM, and the 10-year anniversary was 54. So 59 would have been just after a year, like in 1996 or so, when they were on the cover, which was coinciding with the release of Friction. So perhaps this concert was before Friction had come out. I'm not quite exactly sure, but that's kind of my vague recollection. So one of my first exposures to Stavesacre was this opening band, who were friends of theirs, had something to say about HM that was kind of derisive a little bit. It's kind of funny, and it's kind of a moment of I could take pride in that. You know, pride's always not a good thing, but the fact that HM was relevant enough to actually get somebody ticked off and to say something about it on stage meant that it had some sort of impact with an audience who was there at Cornerstone. I really loved my career with HM Magazine. I love the fact that HM was a thing, and really enjoyed that ride. It was such a blessing to be a part of that for 28 years. And it's out of print now. But, so my first interaction with Stavesacre made me wonder, you know, do these guys like HM Magazine, the band that they let open for them as a favor at their set at Cornerstone? Had that to say about HM. So I was kind of maybe on edge at first about this band. Again, we had them on the cover of HM number 59, and I remember opening it up to the cover story spread. There's a cool color photo of Mark Solomon looking away from the camera with, I think he had mirrored sunglasses on. Just a cool, I always loved really cool layouts, splashing color across 2 pages, the 2-page spread. Anyway, so shortly after that cover story came out, Mark Solomon approached me. We were face to face somewhere. It might have been Tom Festival. It could have been at a show in Austin maybe. But this was my confrontation with Mark Solomon number 2. The first one was in the early 90s. This old lady in Austin, Texas, whose son-in-law got born again through Christian metal, started booking lots of Christian metal shows. She had Vengeance and Deliverance and White Cross and Barren Cross and Sacrament and Believer come through, and she had the Crucified come through. And before the Crucified show at the Austin Opera House, Mark Solomon kind of invited me to take a walk with him, and he walked me down to this hallway and said, you know, basically, how come you don't cover our band more? What's up with that? And I was kind of taken aback. I didn't know what he was wanting to confront me about, but there was some tension in the air, and I kind of explained, kind of in somewhat of my naivete, is, dude, we don't have reporters that go out and scout who we're going to write about. We write about the bands that come to us via publicists from record labels or bands that are in communication with us. So kind of implying that you know, if they would have reached out to us more, we would have covered them more. We didn't, you know, always stick our ear to the ground, because we were like, the blessing of being a media outlet is you become a magnet, and news, information comes to you. So we didn't have to go out and search for, you know, who's the next great band. And of course, all of us on staff there and me personally kind of lived this music scene and was passionate about it. So it wasn't like we had to conjure or study what was hot, what was cool. We pretty much knew it. We kept our ear to the ground, in a sense, just being a normal person. You kept abreast of what was cool. They were from Fresno, and so in the early days, like when their self-titled came out on Pure Metal Records, you know, we got a copy in the mail and probably did a story on them, but didn't cover them as much as we should have, you know, seeing how awesome they were. I mean, the Crucified was truly an awesome band, so powerful and great. Anyway, so that was confrontation number 1 with Mark Solomon, and that went well. I think we were able to resolve. I think he understood that, you know, it wasn't by choice that we covered them less than we covered, say, Stryper, or, you know, the frequency wasn't as high by any sort of decision. It was just, we covered what came to us, and we were kind of responding to the information that was coming to us. And so I think he understood that. So confrontation number 2 happens after that cover story. His story about why he quit the Crucified was part of the interview with the Stavesacre debut album, in which he admitted to an adulterous affair that he had, and he felt like God had kind of called him on it. He wanted to quit being in a Christian band. Didn't feel like he could, I don't want to put words in his mouth, and my memories are kind of vague, but didn't want to, felt like he couldn't live up to the standards or whatever that people had for somebody with a public ministry on stage, and so he wanted to quit. But the cover story in HM said something about fornication. It didn't use the word adultery, and he's like, "What's up with that? Was adultery too big of a sin for you to cover?" And again, in my naivety and my stupidity, it's really naivety. I had a staff member transcribe the interview, and we've always been really good about transcribing accurately word for word, but sometimes these interviews, they're done over a telephone recorded line, and some people that talk fast or talk really low, it's not always easy to transcribe for the words. And I printed what I got, and I didn't go and check it out because when I was editing the story, I don't remember seeing fornication, thinking, wait a minute, it wasn't fornication, was it? Let me go back and check that source. It just went right by me. I didn't make, but anyway, to Solomon, it was like, dude, why did you dodge that? Why did you water down what I was telling in my story? And that was just my mistake. And I went with what I thought was an accurate portrayal of the interview, and in fact, it wasn't accurate, so mistake made. Anyway, so I got to see the Stavesacre play many, many times. And I remember one other huge moment, and just random thoughts I have about Stavesacre, was seeing how they were able to connect with my generation, multi-generations. You know, in the 90s, I was in my 30s, and 20-somethings and even teenagers. You know, the people that were in the audience at the Tom Festival up near Portland and Cornerstone and Austin, Texas, and even at the Tooth and Nail Festival that they played at in Southern California years later, around 97 or 98, I think it was. Anyway, they had this song called, on the Friction album, they had this song called At the Moment, and it really connected with the audience. So just looking around at some of these shows attended by, you know, more than 1,000 people in the audience, shoulder to shoulder, and they come to this crescendo building place, like a chorus. It says, "I will wait, my soul will wait, my soul waits silently," and just people extending their arms, and it seemed to be an expression of worship, that people were proclaiming to God that they're going to wait, their soul's going to wait, they're going to wait for God's resolution, they're going to wait for God's promise, they're going to wait for God's presence, they're going to wait for God to come through and do something. You know, the song has some angst to it and some tension, you know, and to break it down, you know, the problems are tension, and resolution is the freeing or the absolution of tension or a problem. And so just waiting on God to do something, and that it just resonated within the hearts of 20-something-year-old males and the 30-somethings. And I saw it, I was a part of it, I felt it, and it was so cool that this band somehow captured that, because you can't buy that. You can't say, I want to connect with an audience and I want to connect with people's hearts. So this was a heart level. This is something that the band did with authenticity, with being real people, with being unfake, again, real people that wore their heart on their sleeve and that expressed themselves. What was on the inside came out in their lyrics. And so it was just this band, Stavesacre, was a connecting band that connected generations, and not just males, but predominantly young males. And it was awesome to see that, and I saw that in the live setting at festivals. So their third album, when it came out, Speakeasy, that album is a classic. That stands the test of time. I'd give it a 5 out of 5 if I had to rate that album. at this point. I remember seeing them at Cornerstone at the festival, and before the song Gold and Silver, which is kind of like a ballad on the album. And Mark mentioned that so many friends of his had been through some tough times in the recent past, in that year. And I could just sense the depth of that song, Gold and Silver, and in God's compassionate care, and God being there all along, even in the midst of the bottom dropping out of your life or the pain. And another connecting song. It's just so deep, so special to me, and I'm sure many others out there who might be browsing through the Sanctuary International Matrix video catalog. Later on, not too long ago, they did a crowdfunding for this album called MCMXCV, which is like 1995 in Roman numerals. And what is it with bands like Deliverance had that song 1990, talking about this deep dark time in 1990 when they did their Learn album, which came out just a few years after 1990. And so Stavesacre is calling this 1995. I can't remember, some of you who were like Stavesacre heads like I am will recall probably reading the interview where they explain the album title. May have something to do with the death of something in 1995. Who knows? 95 was around the time that Crucified ended and Stavesacre began. Anyway, other thoughts on Stavesacre. One of my staff members, we were having some sort of back and forth tension between, I think, Mark Solomon and Stavesacre and HM Magazine and Tooth and Nail Records maybe, and we were getting some pushback. I can't even remember what exactly it was about, but I remember one of my beloved staff members telling me, basically that the reason that this conflict was important was that he cared, that he really loved Stavesacre. He didn't want the members of Stavesacre to know how much us, a unbiased media journalist, rock journal, music critic, would actually be in love with a band and really like what they do. I guess, trying to go the Lester Bangs route and have this aloofness to it where, you write about them because you're above them, or because you hold yourself to a distance. You can't get close to them. Kind of like a head coach in the NFL can't get too close to his players because he might have to fire him next year. That kind of thinking, that maybe some sort of distance. But I'll never forget him saying that the real reason why this really disturbed him was because he loved Stavesacre so much. And I agreed. I love the band too. And I think one thing about HM, as much as I tried to be a serious form of rock journalism and true journalism, fair and unbiased journalism and intelligent journalism, as I was also a fan. I think one thing, the guy that wrote that book, Body Piercing Saved My Life, Andrew Bajong, wrote this book about Christian rock, and he described me. There was a chapter called Doug Van Pelt, like a Christian lifer, I think, and he described me as not only being like a rock snob or whatever, or a critic, but being a fan, and that the hybrid of both of those things came through in my writing, and so I think that's kind of accurate. I'm a fan, and I'm passionate about this music, and tried to be as critical and unbiased and fair and intelligent and specific as I could in my writing, but I can relate to that. When I went through back in 2013, I was going through a dark time, and I remember talking to Mark Solomon on the phone, and when I'm talking to him via email or something. This is 2013. And the phone rings within the hour, within a few minutes, and he's, sensing that I was in need of a friend. He picked up the phone and called right away. And you never forget that when somebody does that for you. It's like so cool to have people that give a crap about their fellow man. I remember one other thing that comes to mind is kind of, but watch my eyes and listen to my voice as I say this. I recollect this to see if there's any bitterness left in my heart. But at one point in the gosh, when was it? The 2000s? I can't remember the year exactly, but I was told through a second or third hand information that Sam West said nobody bleeping reads HM Magazine anymore. Anyway, and so like, and I kind of took that as a grain of salt and didn't let it bother me big time, but obviously it did a little bit. And somebody, I had to wonder, is this true? Does nobody read it? Or we lost some credibility with some bands? I think we lost the credibility in the van, the back seat of the Stavesacre van, as they didn't give us the same credence or respect as we once had. But anyway, those are my thoughts on Stavesacre the band, and hope you appreciate it. I think my lunch hour is coming to an end, so I'm going to sign off. And so what do you think about this? I wasn't flipping through the pages of a magazine talking about memories of that issue, which some of you have given me feedback that you like, but I decided to kind of take on the band, just from the gut, just talk a little bit about a band that was important in our scene and a band that I have some thoughts about. And love Stavesacre, hope they keep making music, because these guys are special and they know how to write a good song and grab your heart in their lyrics. And one other memory I have, one of the best moments, I think someone actually said this after this set at Tom Festival. Mark Solomon and I took a walk from the Tom Festival grounds at the Stevenson County Fairgrounds to the local gas station, convenience store. And we were talking about football, the NFL and stuff. It was a great conversation between two guys. And anyway, he was also sharing with me, there's this guy that came to Tom Fest, this older man. I call him Pastor Smiles. He would show up kind of like an antagonizing Mark Solomon, like he had a beef with him about maybe Mark didn't call himself a Christian artist or wasn't Christian enough in his songs, or some sort of self-righteous-y spiritual thing that bugged this guy about Stavesacre. And so he made it his point to rebuke or confront, you know. And so every time he came, I think he just kind of put Mark in a bad mood. It's like, oh, I don't want to talk to this guy. He's just like a broken record. He's always talking about the same thing, and it's just, what a pain in the butt. Anyway, so at that show in one of the barns at Tom Festival, Mark was on stage with a water bottle in his hand, and he was in between vocals or whatever, and all of a sudden he just slammed that bottle of water down the stage, and it bounced high and into the audience or whatever, and he got up and, you know, started talking, or I think he started talking before a song. I don't think he just started singing, but it was kind of funny. It's like, somebody said afterwards, like, man, the best Stavesacre show is when Mark Solomon is pissed off. And it's kind of true. It's like that anger, he kind of was able to kind of channel that anger, that energy into a performance that's just full of passion, full of grit, full of intensity. And that was and is Stavesacre to this day, and I so appreciate that, and appreciate them as people, and hope the best for them, and hope for great lives filled with lots of peace and joy, and only the anger that God knows they can put up with and deal with, and help them make some great art, because they do consistently. So that's my conclusion for today's video. So please join the discussion.